on behalf of the silenced. The project for my master's in interior and spatial design involves bringing a greater awareness to the Devdasi system in India. This involves the marriage of young low-caste girls to Hindu goddesses to fulfill their sexual desires. However, this ritual has been exploited by priests and higher caste men who have sex with the Devdasis on behalf of the goddesses. I aim to bring awareness to this issue by breaking the silence and telling their unheard stories. The perpetuation and cause of this system is largely due to the inequality of genders embedded within both culture and religion in India. Religious books such as the Manusmriti and the Vedas favor men and form inequalities based on gender and class, giving men power and justification for the ill treatment of women. The book Awakening Shakti by Sally Kempton describes how through various Hindu stories, such as the one of goddess Sati, we can understand why women have now been silenced in society. The goddess Sati, exhausted of being dishonored and disrespected by men, specifically her own father Daksha, who embodied the patriarchy's inability to see the primal divinity of the feminine, went into a silent meditative state. She activated her internal yogic fire to transmit her life force to the heavens, leaving behind her body. Her body was cut into pieces which fell to the earth, creating pockets of ecstasy within the world. The sacrifice of her body infused the divine feminine into the earth. In Celtic lore, a story is told of the land of goddess worshippers, artisans, and craftspeople being invaded by warrior tribes, but as the invaders rode down to their land, these folk turned sideways into the light and vanished. Legend says that they entered into the cracks between the visible and the invisible worlds. Women have been silenced and mistreated by the patriarchy, who are incapable of seeing their value and importance within society. Until the dignity of the feminine is recognized, true union of the masculine and feminine is not possible. The Devdasi system massively sustains this inequality and abuse experienced by women. Deva means God and Dasi means female servant. The Devdasi system in India is a prime example of discrimination based on caste and gender, stemming from religion, poverty, and societal norms. And despite the various laws against the Devdasi system, it's still practiced in countless rural regions in India due to its underground nature. The lack of knowledge of the corruption and unjustness of the Devdasi system keeps these women trapped and silenced by this cruel lifestyle. Through my project and this exhibition, I have attempted to bring light to the Devdasi stories within this outdated system by creating a safe space for their voices. I have attempted to show how we can give them back their power that has been taken from them. The power of the divine feminine is still greatly missing, as women themselves can't recognize the power they hold. I have explored the complex elements and traditions that make up this system, and how their stories can be told through visual methods other than spoken word, so that this issue can be understood universally. I have largely done this by considering how stories can be told through spaces created by our bodies, through movement and dance. In collaboration with the dancer Rashi Sangvi, we have composed the stories of the Devdasi, specifically the stories of Rupa, Kamalabai, Gelama, and Shobha. We have done this through the form of Bharatanatyam to spread awareness of the system. I have utilized silence to highlight the voices of the Devdasis by forming a space away from the noise of our lives. The Devdasi system and the ideas linked to its purpose have been altered over time, from meaning something good to something bad. Devdasis weren't always seen as prostitutes, but were once well-respected women, as inequality wasn't always present in India. However, due to the invasion of India by various empires, Devdasis were eventually silenced. The Devdasi system was implemented by the Chola Empire. The Chola kings and royal family erected grand temples, functioning as both powerful religious establishments and places of socio-economic activities. As temples developed in India, rulers began implementing Devdasi systems of their own, But with time, the tradition deteriorated, particularly during the medieval Sultanate, Mughal, and British periods. With the destruction of many temples and loss of patronage, their status in society degraded. This led to their exploitation. At this time, temples were a way of showing control. Dancing was likened to prostitution when British reformists marketed Devdasis as prostitutes for their political gain. The temple is meant to be a place of safety and comfort, however, became an unsafe place for many women within the Indian community. The Devdasi system became a tool for institutionalized sexual exploitation of the poorest parts of Indian civilization. Therefore, in finding a site for my project, I aimed to find a temple in which I could tell the stories of the Devdasis. This would act as a way for the Devdasis to confront their past and bring them back to the space that was once unsafe for them, giving them the peace that they deserve. However, after contacting several temples and discussing my intentions, they all believed it would not be appropriate to share these stories of the Devdasis, as the morals of the issue did not correlate with those of the temple. It seemed as though the Devdasis had once again been silenced. It symbolized how religious spaces are still not ready to be confronted by the realities of the world and accept responsibility for the Devdasi system. In finding a site, it seemed that the only space that I had access to and was large enough to dance in was the garage of my parents' house. And over several days, I spent time converting my parents' garage into a more workable space. This video shows the transformation from one site to another, from the temple to the garage, from a public space to a private space. I built a temporary model made from sand. I created the plan of the temple first, and within that, I placed the plan of the garage, showing the difference in the size of the spaces. I then destroyed the plan of the temple, symbolizing the destruction of temples during the medieval, Sultanate, Mughal, and British periods, and how I was not able to use a temple as my site. At the end of the video, all that is left is a small plan of the garage, the final site for my project. As I couldn't actually use a temple for my site, I wanted to explore ways I could create the idea of a temple in my garage, bringing the temple into my house, blurring the idea of the public and private and inside and outside. This idea was inspired by Pablo Bronstein's piece, Historical Pieces in an Antique Setting. So, similar to this, I began to research the various styles of the temples in which the Devdasi system was and still is used. I looked at the Jagannath Temple, the Brihadeshwara Temple, the Lord Kandoba Temple, and the Sri Renuka Yellamma Devi Temple. I looked at the different key elements which were present in all the structures and formed my own simplified impressions of the temples. I believed that by telling the stories of the Devdasis in a temple which was symbolic of a temple would aid in indicating how the temple could once again be a safe place for them. And furthermore, placing an impression of a temple in my garage, a space which is usually hidden from the more public spaces of a house, could symbolize and question the transparency and honesty of what the public is being told by temples which continue to use the Devdasi system. In looking at the various elements of the Devdasi system, I found that in becoming a Devdasi, a marriage ceremony is held to dedicate the girl to the temple. This marriage was signified during the Potukatu ceremony. The priest places a sacred necklace made of red and white beads called a thali. They place this upon the girl, branding them, showing the village she is now a Devdasi. Devdasis held a huge amount of responsibility. Their main duties involved pledging life without marriage, caring for the temple, and learning traditional dances such as Bharatanatyam to perform at temple ceremonies, along with many other tasks. It's believed that if the Devdasi successfully fulfills the sexuality of the goddess, only then will the village be blessed. And so to symbolize this huge burden that's placed upon them, I recreated this thali, but casting it in bronze. Bronze is a relatively heavy metal, and so this signifies the physical weight that's holding them down. In the process of creating this necklace, once it was removed from the concrete cast and sanded down, the necklace was still relatively delicate in certain areas, and so it ended up snapping. And though this was not what I originally had intended, this breakage became a visual symbol of breaking the silence within the Devdasi system, freeing them from this burden that they had to uphold. One of the main duties of the Devdasis was to learn to sing and dance Bharatanatyam. Therefore, I decided that I wanted to tell the stories of the Devdasis through the form of Bharatanatyam. In order to do this, I needed to expand my knowledge of the various gestures. I began by analysing the dance of R. Muthukanammal, one of the last Devdasis of the Muruga temple. She was dedicated at only 7 years old. She travelled across Tamil Nadu, performing and singing as a Devdasi. I broke down each movement, illustrating the gestures and separating the words to understand how they came back together to form a complete sentence relating to the dance sequence. I then repeated this form of analysis with the dance telling the story of Ma Durga. This dancer used her entire body, combining footwork, hand gestures, and facial expressions to tell the story. Ma Durga is known to combat forces that threaten peace, shown defeating the demon Mahushasura to liberate the oppressed and restore peace. The act of drawing each gesture made me think about each small detail which went into creating this dance. I then took these drawings of the various gestures and transformed them into flipbooks to exhibit the idea of a silent film. Through the flipbooks, you focus entirely on the motion of her body and the emotion on her face to understand what the dancer is visually communicating. Faciality isn't just created through the dancer's body, but the physicality of the flipbook adds an interactive element, engaging you with the story of the dance and creating a human connection. After deciding to use dance to tell the stories, I reached out to Rashi and told her of my idea. She was very excited by the idea and agreed to help me. To bring the stories together, I wanted to create a short film showing the various stories and viewpoints of several Devdasis through Bharatanatyam. As my intention for this project was to create my interpretation, we didn't need to create a perfectly choreographed piece, but simply show their stories in a universal form to gain awareness. I chose the stories of the 4 Devdasis, Rupa, Gelama, Kamalabai, and Shobha. These stories show a variety of experiences from different women of different ages. The first story of the Devdasi Gelama is from a village in Karnataka called Hirasendogi. Her story tells of the difficulties she faced with her family whilst being a Devdasi, and how she was viewed within society, which she hopes changes one day. I hope that my project can create a small impact in making that dream come true. The second story is of the Devdasi Shobha. Like a lot of Devdasis, she was forced into a lifestyle she didn't want, a life where the financial stability of her family relied on her being abused by her sister's husband. To represent the horrors that Shobha faced, the dance was carried out in a more symbolic way. It shows her becoming a woman through the gestures of a flower, whereas the gestures of the snake represent her sister's husband forcing himself upon her. Gamalabai. The third story is of the Devdasi Gamalabai. Her story slightly differs from the others, as she comes across as more in control. She has more power over men rather than the other way round, and so she believes she's a Devdasi by choice. This situation is distinct from the others, as she only needs to make money for herself and no one else. Through the dance, I wanted to use strong, bold movements to show this fierceness about her. However, though the dance of Gamalabai shows her as a strong and self-supporting woman, she still lives in this patriarchal-run society, and so she wouldn't be in this situation if it wasn't, and therefore she isn't actually as autonomous as she has been made to believe. Shobha. The final story is of Rupa. She was dedicated to the goddess Yelama as a baby. She was completely unaware of what it was to be a Devdasi. Through her dance, we attempted to show the shackle repetitive lifestyle she lives, having no way to escape because of the responsibility of providing for her family. These dances were filmed within the space of my garage. I created a plain black simple background to highlight the stories of the Devdasis. There is no music, just the sound of the bells on my feet. These are called gungru and are worn by Bharatanatyam dancers. The loud noise they make is enough to make those around notice. It is a signal to pay attention to the stories. Through the film of these 4 stories, I ultimately hope to create a more positive way of bringing Devdasis together, feel powerful by displaying the toxicities of the lives they lead. I want to remind people of the importance of women by highlighting the wounded Devdasi women and how they cannot be ignored. After choreographing these dances, inspired by the work of Pia Manik and Eve Klein, jewel fabric and sindoor to capture and map the movement of the dances of the Devdasis, allowing you to experience a moment for a long period of time and relive the moment of their stories even after the dance has been performed. Sindoor is a red powdered dye placed on the parting of a woman by her husband on her wedding day to represent her loyalty to him, showing everyone she is now a married woman. For, as a Devdasi is seen to be married to a deity, I use sindoor on my feet to create the marks, tracking my movement while dancing. Dances show my understanding of their stories and mark this moment in time to remember them and the journeys they went through. They act as a record and a way to spread awareness of this issue to others. Now that these stories had been told through dance, I further explored how I could symbolize the unraveling of these stories. Again, these drawings showed the gestures from the dances of R. Mutukanamal and of the dance choreographed of the Devdasi Gelama. They have been broken down and translated on a long scroll of tracing paper, creating a film strip to show the various movements within the dance. The rolled up scroll of paper represents the Devdasis being silenced, though as it is slowly unrolled, it symbolizes their stories now being told and revealed to the world. The Devdasis are now able to talk and share their stories. In order to find a way for the stories and the voices of the Devdasis to be heard by their abusers, I wrote the stories of the 4 Devdasis, on a piece of cloth similar to the one a Hindu priest might wear, known as a dhoti. This represents the connection between the two parties involved in the issue, attaching the stories of the Devdasis to their abusers. My intention is not to represent Hindu priests in a bad light, but create an understanding that there's a hierarchy in certain Indian societies that is being abused. Hindu priests are recognized by their clothes. They are known to wear a dhoti, a rectangular piece of unstitched white cotton cloth, typically around 4 to 5 meters long. It is draped around the waist and legs and knotted at the waist. The color is white. In Hinduism, white is a symbol of equality and purity. According to Hindu traditions, all humans should strive to live a sattvic life. Sattva means honesty and concerns a person's tendencies, qualities, and attributes. A dhoti is considered sattvic in nature. It's been given a spiritual connection and importance, as wearing a dhoti enhances honesty of the wearer, protects from negative energy, and enables the ability to absorb Chaitanya, a 15th century saint believed to be the avatar of Radha and Krishna. A dhoti is made from a continuous thread of cotton. Therefore, honesty and Chaitanya also continuously remain in the dhoti and give similar benefit to the one who wears it. The pleats and folds at the back of the dhoti create Chaitanya around the body. The idea that this cloth is something worn so closely to the body and holds so much significance and importance is why I decided to transcribe the stories of the Devdasis in large font capital letters to confront their abusers for onlookers to see. It's a way to symbolize the idea of a priest continually having something wrapped around their body with the words spoken by the Devdasis recalling their past, almost as if to brand them of what they have done. Although this exhibition does not solve the issue of the Devdasi system, it is an opportunity to shed light on the issue and educate someone who may have not heard of it before. Women have come so far within the developed world, but still only a few recognize and live through their innate feminine power and intellect. By bringing these Devdasis together through their stories, it shows the power of their experiences and the power women hold to overcome and escape something so awful. And for this reason, their stories should be looked at as inspiring rather than looked down upon. Gelama, Shobha, Rupa, and Kamalabai are only a few of the many women in this situation. I hope people remember their names and share their stories.